Y en este viernes no podía faltar un nuevo capítulo de la saga J.D. Vance contra los periodistas que quieren enredarlo. Esta vez, J.D. Vance conversa con una reportera del New York Times, quien quiere trajinarlo, pero se le vuelve imposible, porque en verdad J.D. Vance es una persona muy ágil para procesar este tipo de emboscadas. Quiero que vean cómo J.D. Vance avergüenza a esta reportera del New York Times. Evidencia.
The reason that there is a housing crisis is that not enough houses have been built.
And that we have 25 million people who shouldn't be here.
Well, I mean, this is the thing. I
think it's both.
I know you do. I don't think that many people who look into this agree with you, but about a third of the construction workforce in this country is Hispanic. Of those, a large proportion are undocumented. So how do you propose to build all the housing necessary that we need in this country by removing all the people who are working in construction?
Well, I think it's a fair question, because we know that back in the 1960s, when we had very low levels of illegal immigration, Americans didn't buy houses, didn't build houses. But of course they did. And I'm being sarcastic, of course, in service of a point, Lulu, the assumption that because a large number of home builders now are using undocumented labor, that's the only way to build homes. I think, again,
the country is much bigger.
Fundamental.
The need is much bigger. I mean, I'm not arguing in favor of illegal immigration. I'm asking how you would deal with the knock-on effect of your proposal to remove millions of people who work in a critical part of the economy.
Well, I think that what you would do is you would take, let's say, for example, the 7 million prime-age men who have dropped out of the labor force, and you have a smaller number of women, but still millions of women prime-age who have dropped out of the labor force. You absolutely could re-engage folks into the American labor market. This is, I think...
To work in construction?
Of course you could.
Claro que sí, para trabajar en lo que sea. Vamos a continuar viendo esto. Él está diciendo... Hay un gran problema, hay 25 millones de personas más. Mientras esto esté así, va a continuar el problema de la vivienda. Antes se construía, pero no se construía tanto en torno a la vivienda porque no había un excedente de 25 millones de personas. 25 millones de personas son 25 millones de personas, es una cifra considerable. Ella le dice, estás equivocado. Hay mucha de esta fuerza laboral que aporta mucho como trabajadores de la construcción. Un tercio de los trabajadores de la construcción son hispanos. La mayoría, por cierto, hispanos indocumentados. Es la parte que ella no cuenta, que están trabajando en condiciones atroces muchas veces en la construcción. Se podría reincorporar a buena parte de la gente que se salió del sistema y nos quedamos en el punto en el que ella está completamente asustada de que le digan que probablemente mucha de la gente que no está trabajando podría incorporarse a trabajar en la construcción. Le dicen la construcción, como dejando entrever que trabajar en la construcción es un trabajo obligatorio para ¿quiénes? Para los hispanos o para los migrantes que acaben de llegar ilegalmente a los Estados Unidos. Es así como ella lo enfoca. Evidencia.
I mean, the unemployment rate is 4.1%. Most people
unemployment rate, Lulu, this is important.
But most people who don't work can't work in the regular economy. They're in the military, they're parents, they're sick, they're old. They might not want to work in construction.
The unemployment rate does not count labor force participation dropouts. And again, this is one of the really deranged things that I think illegal immigration does to our society, is it gets us in a mindset of saying we can only build houses with illegal immigrants when we have 7 million, just men, not even women, just men who have completely dropped out of the labor force. People say, well, Americans won't do those jobs. Americans won't do those jobs for below the table wages. They won't do those jobs for non-living wages. But people will do those jobs. They will just do those jobs at certain wages. And think about this from the perspective of an American company, okay? I want them to go searching in their own country for their own citizens. Sometimes people who may be struggling with addiction or trauma, get them re-engaged in American society. We cannot have an entire American business community that is giving up on American workers and then importing millions of illegal laborers. That is what we have thanks to Kamala Harris's border policies. I think it's one of the biggest drivers of inequality. It's one of the biggest reasons why we have millions of people who have dropped out of the labor force. Why try to re-engage an American citizen in a good job if you can just import somebody from Central America who's going to work under the table for poverty wages? It is a disgrace, and it has led to the evisceration of the American middle class.
Hay un contraste entre un vicepresidente y otro. Mientras este afronta los problemas de esta manera, los describe por su nombre, el candidato a vicepresidente, el gran Tim, que se anuncia como cazador y se le quedan atascadas las escopetas de caza, Tim Walz, se enreda cuando le preguntan a él por términos tan complicados como la palabra desinformación. Él tiene una tesis sobre esto, él ha manifestado ampliamente antes, tiene un deseo de prohibir la libertad de expresión, lo ha dicho en entrevistas anteriores. Ahora se enreda cuando le preguntan a Tim cómo vas a resolver el tema de la desinformación y el discurso de odio. ¿Cómo tú determinas qué es desinformación y qué no? ¿Cómo forma parte esto de la discusión de los temas cuando se está hablando de prohibiciones? Se enreda Tim cuando le preguntan por desinformación y discurso de odio. ¿Qué fue lo que dijo? Evidencia.
You've said there's no guarantee to free speech for misinformation or hate speech. But first of all, Supreme Court very clear in a unanimous 2017 decision that hate speech is protected. That's the kind of stuff that needs to be protected, stuff none of us like to hear. But more importantly, who gets to decide on the issue of what misinformation is?
Look, the First Amendment is foundational. It's something I spent my whole life, the vice president, and I think most Americans are clear on this. The point being on this, we're seeing censorship coming in the form of book bannings in different places. We're seeing it attempts in schools. The issue on this is the hate speech and the protected hate speech. Speech that's aimed at creating violence, speech that's aimed at threats to individuals. And that's what we're talking about in this. And the decision on that, society decides on a lot of this. The idea of someone going on and threatening someone's life or a child's life online, I don't think any of your viewers think that is something that should be acceptable.
I mean, there's a distinction, you would say, though, between something like a threat and misinformation.
Oh, certainly, and that's what we're talking about. And I think the idea of making sure that folks understand, are good consumers of that, those are the decisions they make. But I've always defend your First Amendment rights, defend your right to disagree on every case. That robust discussion has to happen. And that's why I'm so opposed to book banning. That's why in Minnesota we banned the practice of book banning. Let you make the decision of what you're going to read, whether you find it objectionable or not. The difference is threats, that type of speech.
Okay.
Ese es su eslogan favorito. Cada vez que le preguntas por un tema, él te responde sobre otra cosa como él lo interpretó. Así es Tim. Ser un Tim es comenzar diciendo, yo llevo muchos años investigando ese tema. Él los ha investigado todos, él sabe de todo. La desinformación, es una cosa, eso no es lo que yo te estoy diciendo, qué sé yo. Cuando le refutan la diferencia entre la desinformación, lo que él llama desinformación, discurso de odio, libertad de expresión, que lo dejan desnudo, saca los ojos para afuera, se ve raro, como un loco que han metido en una jaula y comienza entonces a decirte, efectivamente, eso es lo que acabo de decirte, y comienza con una nueva ensalada de palabras que no tienen nada que ver con lo que se le ha preguntado. Ese es Tim. El anterior es J.D. Vance. De los vicepresidentes también se trata. Escoge con cuál te quedas. Hago una breve pausa. Ya regreso.